I want to point out that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I want to hope gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. This is this special edition of Energy Week with George Harvey and Tom Fennell. You see Tom Fennell and George Harvey's fingers. And we have guests Ned Childs and Clay Turnbull, whose fingers are not even in the picture.
This is my hand floating around. Okay.
And they're going to be here talking about the business of decommissioning Vermont Yankee and spent fuel and what we're going to do with all the junk we're inheriting, whether we actually possess it legally or not. We possess it in the sense that it's in our backyards.
It's in the hood.
It's in the hood. Wasn't that the name of a ship that got sunk?
Different hood.
Ah, okay. And so we're going to talk about the spent fuel at Vermont Yankee or whatever else you guys want to talk about. If other things come up, as I have no doubt they will.
Sure. Well, I think the spent fuel is one of the biggest issues facing us right now at Vermont Yankee.
Okay, us being people in Vermont, people in New England, people who want to stay alive, people who,
all of the above.
Downwind, which means people in Seattle and people in Rio de Janeiro.
All of the above.
All of the above.
And I guess in speaking really to southern Vermont and western Mass and southwestern New Hampshire, I think a lot of folks assume what's going to happen. They I don't think take for granted isn't the right word, but they accept someone else has made some decisions about what's going to happen with this waste.
And that it's going to be done wisely, we hope.
Yeah, right. But that I think people need to realize that this is our neighborhood, and we do have a say in what happens on that site.
And that brings us up to the thing that's happening tonight being the night of Thursday, September 25th, in the high school here in Brattleboro, which is not going to be something that people can run out to, because by the time this is broadcast, it will have been an event that has taken place in the past. But it's an ongoing thing. People are going to have a forum where they can state their views and talk about what should be done there. And we have a new commission that's been put together in Vermont, which is
It's the new version of VSNAP.
It's the new version of VSNAP.
The Nuclear Decommissioning Citizens Advisory Panel. Nuclear Decommissioning Citizens Advisory Panel.
So this is NDCAP.
Some people are referring to it as DCAP.
DCAP. That doesn't sound good. It sounds like you're taking the lids off the spent fuel, the dry cask storage that you're decap. I want to find something.
Sounds like what ISIS is doing to journalists in Iraq and Syria.
Let's not go there.
Decap.
And it may end up being referred to as the CAP, the Citizens Advisory Panel.
Okay,
But
right. And what the Citizens Advisory Panel is doing is what?
it's interesting, George, because the Citizens Advisory Panel is made up of primarily political
Appointees.
folks. It's all political appointees for the most part.
Right.
And so in the past, other nuclear plants have formed citizens advisory panels, but it was the licensee that formed it. And the licensee had some accountability to the members on the panel and to the public. They were accountable to some extent for transparency. The way it's set up here in Vermont now is Entergy is just another seat at the table. They have 2 seats at the table on this panel, and do you see the conflict in having an outside body of the public that has an interest in what's going on inside that plant. I've kind of lost my train of thought about how,
You have a
know.
conflict of interest here, where in fact what's going on here is that, as I understand it, Entergy is supplying two people on the panel,
Yes.
and they don't have a responsibility to the panel. They have a responsibility as members of the panel,
Yes.
but they're not going to be giving testimony, for example, to the panel. There are people who are going to be hearing what other people say
And voting.
and voting.
And its standard window dressing is to make it look like the citizens have a seat at the table and a say in what really goes down, but really Entergy's controlling the agenda of the decommissioning.
And
And as far as the NRC is concerned, they can leave it there for 60 years in the spent fuel pool.
Well,
And no fool believes the spent fuel pool is as safe as dry cask. But the NRC, which is 5 fuels, the commissioners, said that the spent fuel pools are as safe as dry cask.
Well, we know from the events at Fukushima that they had serious reservations about, at the very least, about what was going on in the spent fuel pools. But the dry cask storage that was there was undamaged. So dry
Right.
cask storage is safer, and anybody should be able
Well,
to.
the mere
It's
fact,
undamaged.
No,
It's
but-
undamaged.
no, but also the mere fact that the whole theory behind dry cask is you only put enough fuel assemblies and actual fuel rods into the dry cask so that it retains a subcritical mass of fissionable U-235 and plutonium. So it can't explode because there's
Right.
not enough fissionable material.
Right.
So you
Right.
limit that amount. So it is a thermal problem over long term, and then it's a problem of concrete degradation over years and years, and a security risk, and potential contamination of the hydrosphere, biosphere, whatever. We just know for a fact that dry cask storage is safer than spent fuel pool storage.
Now-
the only problem is that industry dictates to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission what they shall say. And what they said to the U.S. District Court in Washington, D.C., was that storage of more than critical amounts of, potentially critical amounts of spent fuel in a pool at 7 stories above the ground, subject to failure from tornadoes, alien invasion, what have you, is as
Are we
safe
talking
as
about
dry cask
Mexicans here?
storage. So NRC has stood reality on its head in the interests of saving industry $1 million a cask, or roughly several $billion of cash expense, to do an immediate dry cask campaign. And there is no other way to explain the reluctance of Alison McFarland, the chairwoman of the NRC, not to impose an immediate but unconditional dry cask campaign for all of the spent fuel pools in our sovereign territory, if not enforceable on the entire world. It's a big scam, George, and you know it. So I don't see any point of pussyfooting around. I'm going to go to the VSNAP meeting, the new VSNAP meeting, whatever, the window dressing meeting, and tell them what I think. Because I want to make sure the people sitting on that meaningless panel that the governor has fashioned as if to make something important happen about how the decommissioning actually happens, and tell them that what they need to know, because otherwise they probably don't know. Because most of the citizens of this country do not realize that just about everything they've ever heard about nuclear power is an outright lie. It was never safe, it was never necessary, it was never green, it was never low carbon, and first and foremost, it was never cheap, ever.
This is a good time to remind viewers that in the first hour we identified ourselves as speaking for ourselves rather than the organizations that we are members of. Did we even mention in this?
I don't even know if we did, Clay.
I don't.
It's
in
sort
this-
of a rhetorical question. If you're the president of an organization, do you speak for that organization or do you speak for yourself?
You have
And
to
what
make
does
that
really
decision.
mean?
You have to make that decision.
But I
You
don't
can
think
say
it's
you're
really,
speaking
I
for
don't
yourself.
think you can just speak for yourself. I think if you're trying to
President
tell
of
the
Brattleboro
truth.
Savings and Loan did.
No, I know.
He
It's
came and
just-
spoke against wind, said it,
But
wind
his-
is bad.
And what did he say? I'm saying this as a citizen of the future and not as the president of Brattleboro Savings and Loan. I mean, if you're saying something, it goes with who you are. And it's
Okay.
really a rhetorical question.
I think what we should do is just point out to everybody that Clay and Ned are here. Clay and Ned are associated closely with the New England Coalition on Nuclear Pollution. And I have been a member of that organization and have worked for that organization. And Tom is innocent.
He's one of the innocenti.
I think
And
it's
so-
important to say that the coalition, as a coalition,
Yeah.
there's members that
We-
are free to express their opinions.
Yes, and when I express my opinion, it's not as a member or a former member or a future member of anything. I say what I feel like saying.
And I just want to let you know that when I say what I say, I'm just telling you the truth. I'm not varnishing it with any opinion. That's all
Yes,
you need to know.
absolutely. And you know that
The
Ned
truth
always
as I
tells.
understand it.
Ned always tells the truth.
But the truth, it depends on your point of view, I suppose, to some people. But
Well,
as far
I
as
think what
I say, I'm not
happens
trying to sway your opinion, other than to just lay out the facts.
Right. And, Clay, you mentioned something here, and it brings something up, which is that there are a lot of people who are worried about climate change, global warming, and whatever, who think that nuclear power is a very important part of the solution to that. And one of them was a scientist whose name was Hansen. Is that correct?
James
James Hansen, yes, and he
of
was
NASA?
he was the person who most people regard as the person who brought the first warnings of climate change. And I have to tell you, I heard about climate change about 30 years before he started talking about that from my 5th grade teacher.
I think the
But-
potential for carbon affecting greenhouse effect, affecting, and the use of coal creating a potential greenhouse effect was proposed early in the 20th century.
Oh yeah, it was. There's no question about it.
Because
but the
coal was
point
in
that I'm
big
making
demand.
is
Ronald
a lot
Reagan
of
was in
people
office.
a lot of people
early in
were
the
talking about
20th century, 1905.
Yeah, a lot of people were talking about nuclear power as being an important part of the mix that would be used for prevention of continued climate change. Climate change is big in the news. Nuclear power has not been of late, and there are a lot of people who feel positively about it. And if you don't mind, I'd like to hit on that a little bit, because in my view, the idea of using nuclear power to prevent climate change is from my point of view, it's a non-starter. It cannot help because it is too expensive, it takes too long. If we're going to build a power plant,
And it's not particularly low carbon.
And you get a whole lot of carbon before you even see 1 watt from that
right,
plant.
and you get a lot of carbon from the plant.
nuclear utility is fond of saying this is a greenhouse gas-free way of making electric power. And that may be true if you suppose that producing that enriched fuel in those pellets and mining that uranium out of the ground was all done with fairy dust, which it is not. It's done by using diesel fuel in the tractors, massive amounts of electricity in the centrifuges in Paducah, about the equivalent of two
Very-
gigawatts of coal-fired,
very dirty coal-fired plants.
and
But-
the release of lots of
But-
chlorofluorocarbons,
Yeah.
which are particularly damaging.
Just looking at the construction
Greenhouse
of the plant itself, you've got
Ridiculous.
huge containment structures that are made out of concrete.
Yeah.
And have you ever taken a look at the steel reinforcing that's done in that concrete? It's unbelievable that reinforcing rods are so thick. You wouldn't use a rod like that as a drive shaft for a huge truck. They're too big. But the concrete is a big user of greenhouse gas emitting fuels to just manufacture.
Just to make concrete.
Just to make concrete.
To make the
Uses
steel
a
and
lot.
the rebar.
Exactly.
Well,
And
now we're going to be investing carbon and tearing all that down.
Yes, and
Yeah, right, the
that
life
is another
cycle, the
thing.
end of the life
It's
cycle.
not even included in there.
It's been a big scam.
It's
been a
big
wild
scam.
ride. And
Now,
to otherwise, there really is no useful use for uranium. It doesn't make steel better. It doesn't particularly go well in a car. It's heavy.
you probably don't want it in your refrigerator.
The only real economic use for uranium is to enrich it and use it. And then you don't even need to enrich it if you use heavy water. You can have a Canadian-style reaction with just natural
Well,
grade ore.
there is
with
another
heavy
use, and
water.
that is to kill Iraqis.
And then I don't know if we're even addressing whether the munitions we're dropping on ISIS in Syria are DU rounds. We need to know. Are we using
Depleted
depleted uranium weapons?
One thing that we've got to know, we've got to make sure that people know is, first of all, depleted uranium, when it's used in the countryside to attack
Is
cakes
a war
or whatever.
crime.
Well, it's
Should
not
be.
defined as a war crime, but
Should
it burns people alive. That's the
And it
first thing. But the second thing
Pollutes
is
their biosphere.
it pollutes the biosphere because it burns uranium, which produces uranium compounds that are spread all over the ground, and they are toxic. They're highly toxic. They're not necessarily highly radioactive compared to
Right.
the radon you find in your basement, but it's highly, highly toxic. And
and the decay chain products that you then spread around are
Right.
introduced into the
But going
biosphere.
back to the nuclear power plant and the idea of the nuclear power plant being built to help with climate change, global warming, Dr. Hansen
It's a myth.
was
It's a distraction.
I don't know.
It's a
Well, Dr.
distraction.
Why would Hansen say that?
because he believed it, I think.
Why
And
would he be so misguided and
because
so
he's
foolish?
now you see that's the point, Ned. Hansen is a brilliant scientist, but he's a climatologist. The other scientists who signed on to that were climatologists and meteorologists. None of them had any expertise in the area of producing electrical power.
Or
So-
economics.
Or economics, but I think they probably know
Because
more about
the
economics.
investment dollars are what will.
But the point is, they look at this and they say, this is low carbon, it's something which is known, we can use this, let's do it. Now,
To this day, the Department of Faculty and Department of Nuclear Engineering at MIT swears by nuclear power that we need more reactors
course.
to deal with climate
Of
change.
course.
And
And if
are
they were-
just singing the wrong tune,
and
Dan,
if they were
out of their minds.
priests of Baal, they would be talking about how Baal needed to be consulted to make sure that this all worked.
That's
they
exactly
are,
right, the priests of Baal,
yeah.
which I think means a lot of bullshit.
You're not allowed to say that on the air, Ned. You're
But
not
that's
allowed.
what
We have
Baal stood for.
No, Baal was an ancient Phoenician deity who was the deity of the Canaanites or something. But the point that I'm making is the Hansen, when he said that, when the people with him said it, there were a lot of people who said, yeah, you see, these are scientists. They know what they're talking about. We need nuclear power. And the thing that they didn't understand is that they're climatologists. They might as well be, mechanical engineers talking about medicine.
So they're scientists, but they're talking outside
Of their area of expertise. And if you pardon me, I know this might sound like hubris, but I think I probably know more about energy than Hansen does, even though I don't have a doctorate, and he does, because I spend my time looking at energy.
One wonders if maybe it's not a bit more sinister that Hansen's programs were funded by the
It could be,
nuclear
Ned, but
cartel
we don't have
as a way to
we don't have to go
bring him
there
into this.
to say he's wrong. It could be
Absolutely wrong.
absolutely innocent
From a purely
and
economic point of view
and there
alone.
you go. There is the problem. You've got to deal with this from the point of view of economics, and you've got to deal with it from the point of view of safety. And as citizens of Vermont, we may be not allowed by judicial decree to put the kibosh on Vermont Yankee from a safety point of view, but by golly, we have a right and a responsibility to talk about safety. And as citizens, and
This is correct, and I think we really have to pick this fight. And I speak as citizen of Dummerston and president of the New England Coalition. The fight is not over. Vermont Yankee is closing, and yet we are downwind from Indian Point Nuclear Power Plant, which is facing a relicensing struggle. We are downwind from Seabrook, even, although it might be after it passes over Japan. We're downwind from every other nuclear power plant. And none of it was ever necessary. So as we confront these issues on the decommissioning of Vermont Yankee, we're going to take the fight to the NRC
Now,
to force them to reconsider their considered opinion that we've thought about it and we don't want to think about it anymore. Spent fuel pools are as safe as dry cask. There you go. There's our industry-friendly decision. Take it or leave it.
Yes,
we're not
right.
going to take it and we're not going to leave it.
But let's just talk about this for a minute. The issue here, just on economics, on economics, a nuclear power plant is expensive. A coal burning power plant is expensive. A natural gas power plant believe it or not, is expensive compared to wind and solar. And what we've been seeing in the last year is, like the, excuse me, the city of Austin, Texas, put out a power purchase request on power. They got answers from the natural gas people. They got them from coal. They got them from nuclear. They got them from solar. They got them from wind. The cheapest power that was available to them was from wind. The second cheapest was natural gas from a baseload natural gas plant. But they didn't want baseload. They wanted peaking. They wanted daytime. The cheapest for daytime, aside from wind, was solar. So they went with solar. We had people in Minnesota, same exact kind of scenario. 6 plants considered, 1 was wind, 5 were natural gas, wind won on the basis of the money. It was cheaper power in the long term. Wind power, 2013, the average price for power purchase agreements was 2.5 cents per kilowatt hour. Wow. Nuclear cannot compete with that. It can't get to 5 cents per kilowatt hour.
Unless the government gives them free money to build the plants,
right.
which they're in the
and
business of trying to do.
If you take all of the subsidies and all the rest of that out of there, nuclear, the price of wind goes up, the price of nuclear goes up. Nuclear cannot compete with wind. Nuclear also cannot compete with solar. And if you think about a new nuclear power plant, what is the nuclear power plant in
Georgia at Vogtle, or in South Carolina at Sumner?
It's the one that's been under construction since 1983. Which one is that? It's the TVA?
I don't know.
That they're reviving.
They've the last Watts Park. I'm not sure.
Watts Park. They've been building this plant for 41 years.
Yeah.
How quickly can you get a nuclear power plant online?
You can maybe 10 years. They're thinking.
Maybe 10 years. They keep talking about shorter times. They keep talking about
small modular
reactors. The first one of those to come out as a pilot program is going to be 2022. The second one is going to be 2027.
We hope to convince Bill Gates of the era of his ways long before 2022. But I knew Bill Gates
but even
at Harvard.
Even if it works the way it's advertised, it can't come online quickly enough to deal with global warming.
It's a total scam, George, from the insurance scam.
And how many of these plants would they have to build to deal with global warming?
Hundreds, if not thousands.
And are they going to do that? And
No.
the answer to that is no.
There's
they
not
aren't
enough
going to do it.
uranium to fuel that
Well,
many
even
plants.
if they fueled them with thorium, even if they came up with a new technology, even if they did all of this stuff,
It's still not going to amount to a hill of beans.
you're completing my sentence exactly the way I meant
just don't understand. and even at the current...
I'm going to go put some money in.
I did.
and I bet you,
I put some in yours. You're good. You're good.
I was going to say you could probably
No.
complete that sentence.
Yeah, no, I had to put some in your meter.
Thanks.
Okay.
We're good.
And Chiclet's happy,
for
so
the hour.
everything's... People should be introduced to Chiclet.
The question we have to be asking very, very seriously till we get a real answer is cui bono? Who's making out? Who benefits?
So I differ from that.
Yeah.
I differ from the three
You
of
want
you.
to change back to all the four of us
in
on
terms of
screen again, or-
subject
We could do
matter.
that, but I think that we're going to have to get back to the
Oh, good.
the screen
Yeah.
there at some point.
Because I think we could debate the pluses and minuses of nuclear power and whether it's expensive or not.
But somebody's
Say,
making
that's-
money
so
on
that's-
it. If nobody was making money on it, there wouldn't be any.
Well, there's
It's about the uranium.
saying about the mob in the city really got control when they started taking care of the trash. Whoever takes care of the trash has a lot of control. You let
Right.
the trash build up in New York City and Manhattan on the streets.
And whoever
Right.
takes
You got
care of the nuclear mess is going to have a lot of
So
control.
there's good money in decommissioning. There's
A lot of money.
I'm not talking about decommissioning making money. I'm talking about building these plants.
Well, I'm
Why are we
talking about
building these plants? Because
I'm
somebody's
talking about
making money.
decommissioning because that's in our neighborhood, and
Well,
that's
yeah.
what's up right now. And next month, the Public Service Board is going to be opening a docket or reopening a docket on Entergy's application for a certificate of public good to build a second high-level waste repository or
Right,
pad
right.
in Vernon.
Emphasis.
an ISFC, Independent Spent
no,
Fuel
fuel
Storage
storage.
Is there
Installation.
some reason why we should oppose that?
No, we should support that. We want to get it out of the spent fuel pool onto the pads.
Do you
As
think that
quickly
they
as
would do
possible.
that anyway?
What do you mean, do it anyway?
Do you think that Entergy would take the fuel out of the spent fuel pool without pressure to do that?
No.
I disagree.
You think they would?
I think they would. You know
They
why?
might for an
Yeah.
economic
No.
reason.
I'll tell you why. Because they want to start taking that place apart. You know why?
They can pay themselves.
Because they
lots
get
of
to
money.
pay themselves from the money that you put into a decommissioning
There you
fund.
go. So they're
Okay.
getting paid on the way
There's
out.
good cash.
You're paying your thief to
You
leave.
paid on the way in, and now it's.
That's what I said. This one guy, I said, you beat everybody else because you are actually having me pay you to rob me. He was using my truck to sell my fuel oil that I was paying him to put in the tank that he was supposed to be putting in my equipment, but that he was selling to somebody else's fuel tank to heat their house. And so this is essentially what I see Entergy. We're paying them on their way out after having robbed us, but in a way, we knew what we were doing. It was all part of the scam, and we were sort of hoodwinked into it. We're good Americans.
Well, we
General
had- we
Electric
had-
was big in Vermont.
But we
for
had
years.
the
Still is.
Walt Disney behind it. Walt
Yeah.
Disney's a nice guy.
It was all propaganda, smoke and mirrors, which should have died at 3 Mile Island, should have definitely died after Chernobyl, and there's no reason to keep it on life support after Fukushima. There is no off switch for these things when they melt down and go ex vessel. That's the terrible truth of the matter they confronted in the China Syndrome that
Yes.
they've never responded to. And if you can't answer the question, you don't answer the question, you simply divert attention from it.
Yes.
And that's what's going on.
Right.
And we are going to pick a fight with General Electric and the NRC and anybody in the British Crown that owns uranium mines in Australia on the blog site, on the streets, in the theater of public opinion going forward, because the uranium scam must be stopped. And I say that as a private individual and a growing member of an informed public. And if they want to come after me to shut me up because I oppose their uranium mines, let them come. But
Do you
I
have
won't be
a
silenced.
price you would charge for that?
Just a gallon of maple syrup will do.
At least for a few minutes. Yeah.
It's about the uranium cartel. It really is a sad, sad fact.
Well, you know, one of the things that's interesting to me as I hear what you're saying is that for the last 3 years, as I have been looking at, news daily,
Yeah.
just finding everything that I can, there's an item that keeps coming up, and it comes up probably 3 or 4 times a month, and that is how the price of uranium is all set to go up because it's at a low.
Right.
People are not buying it, and it's just about to go up because we've got 60 nuclear power plants that are
under
being built.
construction,
Some-
supposedly.
yeah, and the problem with that is not all of those plants are under construction. We saw that today
Yeah.
in the news from Vietnam, where they said we had this plant that we were going to start building in 2015, but we've decided to put it off for at least 5 and maybe 7 years,
Yeah.
just to check and make sure that it's safe. Well, what are they going to do in that period of time? Really?
Stop brushing their teeth.
I mean, honestly, what are they going to do to check and make sure
They're
that
going to
it's
put in
safe?
some solar panels and figure out they don't need any nuclear.
I think that's exactly what's going to happen. And we're seeing, right now, we are seeing one of the most democratic movements in the history of humanity, where people are starting to get solar power on their roofs. They're starting to get batteries at cheaper than the cost of grid power and putting those in their basements. They're starting to see a situation where they can actually pay less money for the same amount of power they're getting by borrowing money, investing it, paying for the investment costs, and paying for the equipment, and doing it themselves, being self-reliant, not being reliant on big business. Ned,
It's a tremendous time.
and Entergy, 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, they said, this is our business plan. We have always made money on nuclear, coal, and gas. We know how to make money on nuclear and coal and gas. We're not
And
going to
sawdust.
change that.
Entergy started on sawdust.
And we are not going to change that. We're going to move into the future on nuclear, coal, and gas. So
And
they've
sawdust.
got a 20-year plan built around nuclear, coal, and gas. I can't
gonna
imagine.
fizzle.
So you're
Fizzle.
advising shorting the stock.
I'm not advising shorting the stock. I'm just advising if you own it, maybe you should think about selling it. You know, if your name is Rockefeller, this is not going to be rocket science for you. You already see.
You already own Google.
You
and
are
eBay
already at a
and
point where
Facebook.
you're divesting because the family organization is divesting.
Well, we can only hope there's enough democracy in the marketplace that nuclear will die a natural death before it has polluted the biosphere.
Well,
such that life
this is the thing
rendered
that I'm worried about,
impossible.
though. Entergy, what happens when they go out of business? The Coke Industries, what happens when they go out of business?
There'll be
picks
some
up
dry
the pieces.
casks full of high-level nuclear waste in Vernon.
That the town of Vernon will surely take care of for us.
Because they got paid lots and lots and lots of taxes that they saved up money for over a period of time when they had a nuclear power plant there that paid lots and lots of taxes.
They paid lots of blood money.
Well, the thing that bothers me about Vernon is when that plant in Vernon was running and Maine Yankee was not, Maine Yankee was paying higher taxes. Why? Why is that?
Because there was a value placed on the spent fuel storage installation.
Well,
Maybe the assessor ought to go take a class at the Maine Yankee site.
well, it may be, but this is,
There's all these pictures coming up on the
Yeah,
screen.
I
Why
wanna
don't you
know-
tell us what they are?
Ned, can you help with this sight line? What does that mean? What is the sight line?
Site plan. It says
No,
site-
Right here,
line.
sight line
Oh, that's what you would see if you were standing,
along that.
I guess it's at the top of the Vernon Dam. So that's it. If you can see the top of the Vernon Dam, then that height of land is about
So there's the dry fuel storage.
from the Governor Hunt Road.
let's get somebody up there actually pointing at this with his fingers so that we can have people understand what's going on here. Whoa! We all knew that was going to happen sooner or later. Don't worry about it, ladies and gentlemen.
Anti-nuker down. Anti-nuker down.
This was done on purpose, just to shake you up. Aw,
That's how we're gonna get rid of them.
poor Chicklet is upset.
All right, so sightline. This is if you're standing on Governor Hunt Road,
Right.
you're at this elevation, and you're looking. I guess
There it
you're-
is. There's the
so
sight
right
line
here.
right there.
I would bet that the bottom of that sight line is what's on the left on that graph.
I would bet that too.
So what's on the right of the graph is the river, or close
Well,
to it.
Well, this is dry
that's the
fuel
DFS, and that picture is up there.
Dry fuel.
Dry fuel storage.
Well, what I.
That's right.
All right, so.
Yeah, right there.
Without knowing so there's the sight line. Here is the existing dry fuel storage pad,
oh, okay, you
and-
got the arrow on it. All
and
right.
this is the proposed dry fuel storage pad.
All right, come back.
And
Oh, it's right next to the old one.
just right next to the old
Yeah.
one. And a point of reference is this is the reactor building
And the generator
and the generator turbine building.
Yeah,
So the river is right here.
yeah.
That's all that white area. And you see the dry, when this first dry fuel storage was installed, their application said, well, this is an area that makes sense because it's within the high security boundaries
Right.
and is well protected, it's close.
Close is important here.
So there you go. There's their first pad. They have an application in to buy this, to install the second pad.
Where there's currently a building, they would take a building down and put a concrete pad. Because these things are so heavy, they have to be reinforced from the bottom.
Yes.
So all of this other stuff on the site will be gone, right? The parking lot, the cooling towers,
Well, even the turbine building.
the turbine building, all this stuff is going to be gone. And these two blocks and some chain link fence and a little bit more, a visual barrier are what will be
A
left.
plywood fence.
So
Is there going to be a
apple-
guard station on this? Will there be?
There are
Yeah.
four
Live-
guards.
Yeah,
There are
there'll be-
4 or 5
There will be
guards.
4 or 5
Armed-
guards. Armed guards. Okay.
Yep, armed guards.
Yep.
The second pad, the rationale for locating it here is, well, it's beside the first pad.
Right.
Doesn't that make sense?
Yes.
But step back and say the rationale for the first one is because it was beside the building. Since the building is no longer going to be there, since it's not going to be an active generating site, does this area make more sense than over here at a higher elevation?
Well, you'd have the stuff sited in two different locations.
No.
Are you
You
talking
take
about
you
moving
take-
all of the?
Take those 2 blocks and move them.
So you're talking about
over
building
here.
a pad that's twice as big in a different location?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, but I think that's the.
I'm not saying that that's what should happen.
But it's something that should be thought about.
It's something that the coalition believes that the Public Service Board should
Consider.
An
make
alternate-
Entergy investigate.
Yeah.
I'm thinking if you're going to move it somewhere in Vernon, on the Vermont Yankee site, you might want to move it to someplace else in Vernon that is not subject to an inland tsunami, an upstream dam failure, or a massive
now
flood.
let's just talk
'Cause there
about
are-
that for a second.
So there's
What is
another
the-
option.
What
There's
is
any
the?
number of other options that
But
that
you have to go
the
through a
world
process.
that there's any number of other options that are not here.
Right. Now, how high is that pad above the 500-year flood
It's only
zone?
about 4 feet above the 500.
I thought it was closer than that.
But they're projected to be fine if they get their feet wet.
I know
even
that.
if they're submerged.
I know that. I know.
But so,
They got their feet wet at Fukushima, and they didn't fail at Fukushima.
Right.
So
Intuitively, I would feel safer if it was on higher ground.
Right. Well, that's as far as that's how you make a floodplain map is based on elevation.
Yeah.
So the higher, the safer as far as getting their feet wet. But in terms of the feasibility of having the spent fuel pool emptied, you probably need at least an interim site close to the spent fuel pool. Because the whole issue of transporting these things comes in.
Well,
not
if
gonna be-
Entergy
That's
is
where
going to
they're
move
stuck.
this stuff, it's going to cost the money, which they can charge against the decommissioning fund. So maybe it would be in their interest to do it.
you keep moving it many times.
That's a lot of this
moving it.
conversation right now is speculation
Yes.
and an opinion. And the reason that the coalition goes through the legal and regulatory hurdles process
Yes.
is because that's when you get information on the record. It's
Yes.
when now Entergy historically hasn't always provided accurate information on the record. Unfortunately, we found that out about the buried pipes. But that's only the reason the buried pipes became such an issue is because it was in the record that they lied, that they provided misinformation.
Right.
If they had told you on the street corner, oh yeah, we don't have any buried pipes, there's no recourse, there's no, So with this is a really key time in the history of Vermont Yankee, because they're going to locate this high-level waste someplace in Vermont, probably close to the existing building.
Where they're
Almost certainly.
already locating it.
Almost certainly.
And
It's not a question of where they're already locating it.
Is the footprint that they're proposing right now the best place?
Well, now let me ask you something. Let's just say, for example, that they decided they were going to take over the elementary school and use that location, which is obviously they will not do, but just as a
Right across the road.
right across the road. In other words, they're moving this stuff from the site where it is
From the spent fuel pool.
to a place that they
Dry
do not
cask storage
own,
area.
that has no license from the NRC associated with
Right.
it or anything. They would have to jump through hurdles to do that,
Right.
wouldn't they?
To get a new
I mean, just the matter of hauling those things, putting them on a truck,
Yeah.
and then driving that truck across the street.
Yeah.
They would have to have licenses. They'd have to have the
Really?
Public Service Board give them permission. They'd have.
Clay, let me just put it this way. The first and most important task is to empty the spent fuel pools. That's where it's really dangerous. That's where it's many, many cores.
Yep.
3 or 4
Absolutely.
cores. Thousands
I think
of
we all know
Fukushima-
that, for
Hiroshima
sure.
bombs worth of radiation. Get it out. Even if the spent fuel storage pad, the interim pad, is not where you'd like it, it's still safer anywhere but in the spent fuel pool up where you can't have easy access. The second question
how long
is
does it
where
have
to
to
put
stay in the
those
pool
casks.
before they take it out?
Well, that's an interesting question. Arnie Gunderson used to say a year and a half. The original thought was maybe even less than a year before it would go to a reprocessing facility.
But now-
then now they say, oh, it needs to cool for 5 years. It's all the way passing the buck and saving money today. Oh, it's got to cool for 5 years, but in fact, you could move it after 2 years.
So even
most
if
of
it's-
it.
it-
and a
let's
lot
ex-
of it's been sitting there for 30
Let's
years.
accept it for 2 years. 2 years is enough time to build a second ISFC pad, twice as large as the one that's existing.
No, just as large again, right? As large.
Twice this size, twice the size of what's there now.
You need to build
so-
for
Because
what's
this
there
one's-
now, plus the new stuff and the new
The
pad.
original-
Well, the original pad is not big enough to take all of the
Right,
fuel.
so
The
if you
original
were to
pad
move
holds
all
about
this stuff,
30. The
you-
new pad will hold about 30.
So if you were to build a pad that took both, it would
It
have to
took
be
60.
It would
If you
have to be
built
twice
that
as
pad
big.
for 60 at a better location, if there is a better location, if you build that pad for 60, then you start unloading the spent fuel pool as soon as you can and haul it to that new pad.
Right.
And then after
we don't
the
know that
spent
there's a
fuel
better
pool-
location
We
because
don't,
we'd
but
have
I
to know.
think
This
we
stuff
should-
is extremely heavy.
Yeah.
And you have to know something about the geology of the land that you're putting it on. You can't put it on a piece of property that's got,
Subject to earthquake risk.
well, or just is soft and will allow subsidence.
That's why a study is necessary.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, but the point is that we don't want to wait for the study to take it out of the spent fuel pool. We know
Absolutely.
they already passed a pad, which means that it met the requirements for the pad right next door to the pad where they have it, where the actual
This
pad.
is starting to sound
So-
like a song.
So the point is, get it out of the pool, stop delaying it, and then if you want to consider, this is really where the debate.
Why do you think it's exclusive? Why do you think it's exclusive that they either empty the pool or they have to build a new pad anyway,
Right.
no matter what?
I wouldn't quibble
They ha-
with them
they
building
haven't
it
filled
wherever
the-
they say they're going to build it.
They
I'd
haven't
say-
filled the pad that's there. They
Well-
could be emptying stuff and putting it onto
Well,
that
that's what
pad.
they are doing. There are more than 4 there now. There are 6 or 8. I believe.
19
But they could
or
keep
more.
going while they're building another pad in a different location, and then they could move all of those canisters to the new location, and they, in addition, they could put
I
stuff
would
in.
rather see 2 pads. One pad where it's close and cheap and easy, and they've demonstrated
Fast.
an ability and a willingness
Yeah.
to remove some of the spent fuel
Yeah.
pool too, and then build another pad safer than the first pad after you get the fuel pool emptied. That's not. You can build 3 or 4 pads.
You just
Clay.
said safer. You just said a safer.
It's
So
safer out of the spent fuel pool.
why would you not have them build? Why would, if they found a better location on the site?
Look, any
If-
location higher up than that site would be better, but they're not likely to find it and go through the legal and the permitting and the political process.
They,
in time to
they
quit.
clearly have expressed their interest not to do that
Right,
because
so then don't do it.
They've
Because
proposed
what
the
we-
cheapest. They've proposed the
So then
cheapest
you're
option available.
wasting your breath to tell them to don't take it out of the spent fuel pool because there might be a better place.
There's
where-
no one is proposing that, Ned.
Well, this-
Nobody. I don't think anyone
Well, you're
knows.
saying-
I don't think even nuclear proponents. I don't think
saying what?
anyone thinks that it's in the interest of anyone to leave the fuel in the pool.
Well, no, that is exactly what the NRC is saying, that they have approved Safe Store because it is in the economic interest of industry not to spend $1 million today if you can spend it 60 years from now. And that's how the whole thing rode in us
Okay,
on false
listen,
economics.
gentlemen, it is now
Wow. Time flies, doesn't it?
12:25, and I have absolutely forgotten what time this segment
Started at the 36 after, so we're 50 minutes in.
We're
5-0.
50 minutes in. Okay. Well, what I want to do is I want to work toward a situation where people who are watching this can understand very clearly what we're talking about and what's happening.
Right.
And I think the bottom line here is, first of all, if you don't mind my reviewing this, first of all, the new equivalent of VSNAP is being formed. It's going to meet tonight, which is
But there's no point going
At
because it's a
6:30.
meaningless puppet show.
I don't know
I
that
think
that's
it's
true.
good to tell those people what you know. Tell
Yeah,
them the
I don't
truth.
know that that's true. I'm not going to be able to be there
that
because
was a
I've got to work.
facetious statement.
Yeah, I have to work, and I will not be
No,
able
they
to be
don't
there.
have very much authority. This new group is not going to tell Entergy what they're going
Nevertheless,
to do.
if you say
but
something
it's the only
to
thing
you,
we got.
it's the only thing we've got. If you say something to them, it goes on the record.
That's right.
It's important to give them
Okay.
factual, credible
Yeah,
information.
and what they're going to be considering is how we move ahead with a situation where we've got enough poison sitting up 7 stories up in the air to cause us to have to evacuate New England, really.
All of New England.
Yeah, basically, that people who are proponents of nuclear power will not like hearing that. But if that spent fuel pool went dry, we'd have a serious problem on our hands.
So would Boston. Their
So would
reservoir,
Boston.
The open
So would
waters of their reservoir.
but so would Providence, Rhode Island. And in fact, if you
But
look
George, I like to remind people, because they don't necessarily know, the 5 million customers of the Metropolitan District Commission, the Boston Water
Yeah.
Supply Organization.
Yeah.
The open waters of the Quabbin Reservoir, their main system, and lie only 17
miles.
from
But
that
Ned,
spent
I
fuel
want to
pool
point out
in
to
the
you,
prevailing wind
the
direction.
amount of material that's in that spent fuel pool is more than was ejected from Chernobyl.
Right now,
And
the
it could
fuel
be-
pool is here in the reactor building.
And it could be ejected in a fire.
The big box.
This is the existing spent fuel pad. You can see 4 casks on it. There's the river.
If you're very close.
This brown thing is a 20-some-odd foot high
Wooden fence.
wooden fence barrier that prevents line of sight targeting of
From
the casks.
Hinsdale.
It also prevents photographs from being taken.
So it prevents line of sight targeting from the river or from across the river.
Okay. Now, the point that I wanted to make here, Ned, just so people know,
And
the
what
amount of
I want to
material.
make is that this place is probably less dangerous
Yes.
because that barrier is there.
Okay.
And the only reason that barrier is there was through legal intervention in front of the Public Service Board.
Okay.
Next month, the public has an opportunity to shape, potentially, to shape what happens on this site. That fuel is going to be there for a long time.
Right.
Do you want it just sitting out on a concrete pad, surrounded by some chain link fence and armed guards?
Okay.
Would you
We
like
want
it
a
to have
wooden-
additional barrier?
Okay.
Would you like a building over it? Would you like it moved away from the river's edge?
All of this is stuff that people can say to the people in this committee who have almost no power.
No power.
Okay. Now, getting back to what I was saying, the possibility of this
Or you
being
could
lethal.
say to the Public Service Board, which does have jurisdiction over land use issues
Right.
when reviewing a 248 application.
Right.
Land use issues is not safety. The Public Service Board can say that piece of property would be better useful.
Now, that's a very good point.
It would be more useful if that waste wasn't smack in the middle of
Right.
the riverfront right there.
Yes, it would be more
Well, that's
useful if it
not
were higher,
bad.
and they could actually say that. If you don't mind my saying this, I was in the middle of a thought. I want to get back to it. I said that stuff is dangerous in the spent fuel pool. If the spent fuel pool dried, you would have the potential for a fire that would put all of it into the
Why are
atmosphere.
you telling us that?
Now, the
Why- how
point
is
that I'm
that
making,
relevant?
the point that I'm making is,
Yes.
I know that people in the nuclear industry and proponents of nuclear power would object to the idea that this would possibly make us lose New England. However, I want to point out, you talked about prevailing winds. If the prevailing winds around a disaster like that happen to be similar to what they were at Chernobyl, we would be losing agricultural crops in Wisconsin. And that is, I know, because they lost agricultural crops in Finland and Scotland.
I guess that's why the transfer to dry cask storage is very important.
Yes,
And
it
that's-
is. It's
and that
very
means
important.
Decay heat problem.
Yeah.
It has to do with the decay heat problem.
This
because
is
there's
something
enough
that we
decay
have to
heat from
consider,
spent
and
fuel.
when we're considering it, we have to talk about reality. And reality is this stuff is dangerous, and it's dangerous to everybody in New
Less
England.
dangerous if it's separated into the amounts that go into the dry
And I
gas.
think that's a very
And it-
good way of
and it
putting
will
it,
be
because
avoid
it's
a
not,
fuel
it's not
pool.
safety,
And
it's
how many years will
safer.
it be dangerous?
Well,
Many, many, many?
there's a
100,000,
there's a
200,000?
very objective way that it was developed to look at
It
this.
was actually a facetious or a,
I know, but I can
rhetorical
answer. I can
question.
answer your
The
rhetorical
stuff is
question.
going to be dangerous for as long as it's there. And the NRC 2 weeks ago said it can stay there safely indefinitely.
Yes, well,
Indefinitely.
Clay, what I was going
So
to
let's
say
do it
as an
right.
answer, an objective answer to the question, how long is it dangerous,
Yeah.
is it's dangerous until it's no more radioactive than natural substances
Mm-hmm.
that are found in nature.
About a million
and
years.
that is about 6 million years. You can calculate that. This stuff will be about as dangerous as naturally occurring uranium ore, which is not safe, by the way, in 6 million years. So the number that you get that says 10,000 years, which is it's double the total length of human history.
Right.
You know, really, if you put this stuff in the pyramids, you would see it 5,000 years later and cased in a degrading monument.
Right.
Are the pyramids going to be there in 5,000 years?
But
we
then
don't
again,
know.
George, it's important to point out that really it's the long-lived actinides, primarily plutonium in quantity,
Right.
that rendered that such a long time frame.
That's right.
The other dangerous
The short-term
fission
stuff-
daughter isotopes, the strontium and the cesium, are generally gone in 600 to 1,000 years.
Wow.
So if they could
That
take
means-
the long-lived actinides out of the spent fuel, if there were a way to cheaply or safely, which there isn't, way to do it, then you'd only have to store. This is what they dream of down at MIT, is ways to manage the spent fuel economically and build a business around it, and separating out the plutonium from the cesium and the strontium,
Yes.
and the thing is all subject to release.
We are
and
coming to the end of
catastrophe.
our time now, and I want to point out to everybody who might be marginally upset about the things that we've been saying that if you want to have your own show, you can have it.
Well, I would
Or
say
you can come on.
I would
You
say
can
in
come on.
closing,
Yeah, I would invite
No,
anybody
yeah.
from Vermont Yankee to come on.
Yeah, and rebut what has been said
what
here
has been
today.
said here. Yeah, absolutely.
I would like it to be clear that I didn't come today to promote an anti-nuclear agenda. My concern, and to hear about the science and the chemistry and all that, it's fascinating stuff. It's not for me. It's
Okay.
not for what the coalition is facing next month here in Vermont right now. If you heard some frustration in my voice, it's because while we're discussing the good or bad of nuclear power, we're not discussing the very real, tangible facets of decommissioning Vermont Yankee. And that
if-
would be another show,
If I
suppose.
may,
Yes.
what I would like to do is suggest that anybody who wants to discuss that contact Clay Turnbull
Right.
At the New England
at
Coalition.
the New England
That's
College
right.
or Ned Childs.
Yeah, no, because
Thank you,
the New
George.
England Coalition wants to continue being a steward of the environment locally, but I believe that the future of the coalition is in addressing the bigger question of whether it ever made sense to have any nuclear power, and take that truth to the NRC in the interest of shutting down the utility of the industry
Isn't that a bit
planet-wide.
theoretical since they've already done it?
No, because it was never safe enough. They were lying about how safe it was when they commissioned the first reactor study from Brookhaven. And then the Brookhaven study was covered up in the 50s. If you know the history, you would see it's laid out in the book by Fuller, John Fuller. We almost lost Detroit from the 70s.
That's Fermi
The
1.
Fermi 1
Yeah,
meltdown.
and we almost lost Los Angeles also at the sodium reactor experiment, which,
Right,
contrary
in
to the
Simi
name of the
Valley.
thing, was in fact a commercial nuclear power plant that was on the grid.
And
George,
was liquid
you mentioned
sodium
they would need to build a road to transport the casks.
Yeah.
They're doing that now in Pilgrim, at Pilgrim Nuclear Power Station.
But is it
Plymouth,
going
Mass.
off-site?
It's not going off-site.
See, that's the point. In order for a road, in order for those dry casks to be removed from the site, they would have to go through so many hoops.
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
There might
I
be a
mean-
better place on the site.
There might be a better place on the site. So I think that, we don't have to talk
Yeah,
about
that's getting to the specifics.
we can
That's
just
the ongoing discussion.
right, and we can say, wouldn't it make sense to have this 10 feet higher or 15 feet higher? There are
'cause
places
you
on
could
the
just
site that you can do
build
that.
it up higher.
And they do have to be investigated because we don't know what the soil under them or the stone under
But
them.
with
or
the
what
idea
it's
that I think we're everybody on both sides of the issue is thinking that there will be a medium-term storage facility, probably in West Texas, for all of the dry casks.
I don't believe it for 1 minute. My mind can't even go to that. I don't think we will ever have a natural
Candidate owns it.
depository.
He's asking.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can ask all you want. That's fine. But it's not going to happen because how do you get the stuff there just to begin with? How do you
Rail
transport
or a truck.
Right, and
Trailer.
you believe that you can do that. Well, okay, I will admit.
That was baked in from the beginning. That's why we built the interstate highway system.
Yeah.
Was to
Listen.
move hot fuel around that into the reprocessing
We've got
plants.
to get off our thing here. We've used up our time.
Oh darn!
The low-level waste,
You guys
the
can come
medium-level
back.
waste in Texas, you can watch a video online of Vermont's first shipments
Yes.
of waste arriving.
So we will say goodbye to everybody.
Goodbye. Goodbye.
Ned
Goodbye.
and Clay can come back and rattle people's cages for a while longer.
Next time we'll sing a song.
Oh, good idea. I'll bring my guitar.
All right, thanks. Thank you.
Yeah,
right,
thank
guys.
you. We spin and we toil, we work all day, sowing and reaping, we store goods away, so we can be dressed well on the day that we die. We dig and drill and waste what we find, break up the earth, leaving little behind, but we will grow lilies in the by and by. I want to point out that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I want to hope gentle rains can fall upon the land so lovely earth can stay lovely still.